Welcome back to Impact Rewind. We're so excited to have you here with us today. So this week we're closing out our series on Epic Fail and talking about King Saul's anger. But first, let's get to the game. So this week's lesson continued on with how King Saul's jealousy led to anger with David and how he wanted to kill him. So David goes to King Saul's son, Jonathan, for help. And he tells him, I think your father is trying to kill me. And Jonathan says, no, he wouldn't do that. Besides, I wouldn't let him hurt you anyway. He said, well, check it out. Tomorrow, there's going to be a feast in the king's court. I'm not going to come. I'm going to go hide out. You go gauge your father's reaction to me not being there and tell me what happens. And so the next day the feast happens. Jonathan's sitting there at the table. King Saul notices that David's not sitting in the seat that he's supposed to be in. And he turns and looks at Jonathan, and he's a little upset because he wanted to kill David. But he looks at Jonathan and says, where's David at? And he says, oh, well, Dad, David had to go to Bethlehem to have an important sacrifice with his family. And Saul immediately gets angry because he knows that Jonathan's not being truthful with him. And he says, what in the world are you doing? And then he gets even more angry, and he stands up and he chunks a spear at Jonathan. And Jonathan manages to get away and go to warn David and tell him that Saul's still trying to kill him. And so we see Saul got angry, and he let his anger get the best of him and get control of him instead of controlling his anger. And he lashed out at his own son. In fact, tried to cause harm to his own son just because he was jealous and angry at David. And if we're not careful, we can allow the same things to happen to us with our anger. So we need to learn how to control our anger. So how can we apply that? First is we need to know that anger is not a sin. It's an emotion, just like happiness or sadness is an emotion. And God created us with emotions. So it's no more sin to be angry than it is to be happy. In fact, in the Bible, in Psalms 4:4, it says, in your anger, do not sin. So we know that it's not a sin to be angry. It's a sin when you start to let the anger control you, when you let it to get the better of you. And all of a sudden, instead of letting this anger bubble up and let it explode and bust out the seams, help me to control it. Help me to be able to do what's right here and to do what would be pleasing in your eyes, not to lose control, not to explode and potentially hurt my friends or my family, but instead to be who you want me to be in this instance and to show control and to have that self-control in it and not be like how King Saul was. So some things that we can do to keep our lives from being an epic fail like King Saul's was is to make sure that we allow God to help us control this anger. So instead, maybe if you're out on the playground and a friend says something to you that you don't like, instead of hitting them, instead maybe walk away and say, God, help me to have control here. Don't let me sit here and be a bad friend and hit them, because in the end, it could hurt our friendships. It can hurt our relationships with our family if we sit here and get angry and let it control us instead of controlling it. And we need to be careful with that and sit there and say, you know what, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be someone who's letting my anger control me all the time. I don't want it to control me, but instead I want to control it. I want to be able to sit here and say, okay, you know what, yes, I'm mad. Yes, I'm angry, but I don't have to let it get the better of me. I don't have to explode. I don't have to say things that could hurt people. I don't have to do things that could hurt people, because see, if we're not careful, when we get angry, we start to say things we don't mean. We do things that we don't mean to do. And it affects friendships, and it affects the way that people look at us, and all of a sudden they start saying, well, he's not a good friend because he's angry all the time, and he yells at somebody or hits somebody. And we can't do that. Instead, we should sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to control it, not let it control me. I'm going to be a good kid in this situation. And instead of letting it get the better of me, I'm going to stand here, I'm going to calm down and say, you know what, it's okay. Yes, I'm a little angry with this, but it's not worth losing my cool over. It's not worth letting it snowball out of control. So I'm going to do what's right in this moment, and I'm going to calm down. And if it's something that maybe needs an adult to help, then hey, I'm going to go, instead of sitting there trying to take it into my own hands and letting it snowball out of control, let me go talk to somebody else. Let's calm down and just get control over it. So, Lord, let us not let this anger get the control of us, but instead let us control our anger, Lord. Let us allow you to help us to be who you called us to be, to have a control over it, to not let it snowball, not let it be something that we can't contain or something we can't control, but instead that we would allow you to work in us and to help us and to let us keep it control instead of being like how King Saul was, and instead we could keep it under control and trusting in you to help us to be who you've created us to be.